let's get moving. So you guys are here, hopefully, because you wanted to learn a bit about expectations versus agreements. This is a big blurb about me. It tells you that I am an expert in my field. I'm working on my PhD in organizational leadership, focusing on what I call the human factor, which is the responsibility that leaders have for creating radical care in the workplace, which means that we should care about your joy, we should care about your happiness, and we should care about the relationships that you have within your lives, both personal and professional. So that's me. I'm not going to go over it. That's not what you're here for, really. You're here for my knowledge. So this is a way that you can stay in touch with us. I do run all sorts of things through this little group that I created. I run adventure retreats for women, which will soon expand out beyond that as well. But right now we've been focusing on women. I do some executive leadership coaching. A few of you are in here, I think. And I do community events. Michelle, thank you for coming off mute and saying hello. Michelle's one of my community members in Chicago. We got to meet each other in Chicago this last month, and it was super fun. I travel a lot. I've embraced my nomadic spirit in this last couple of years. And so I'm all over the place. For work and for fun, and wherever I go, I try to create community. And some of that is no cost, some of it is low cost, and some of it is your investment in yourself. But overall, I really just truly care about cultivating these communities and seeing all these women come together and all these people come together for knowledge sharing and creating a sense of community. Okay, so here we go. Expectations versus agreements. I know we're all on a lunch break, so I'm going to try to stay focused and get you guys into this space. So I'm going to give you first the agenda, just so you kind of see where I'm going for those of you that are the learners and the content analytics in the group. We're going to talk about where this came from, the expectations versus agreements concept. I'm going to give you some data and information. I love data-driven decision-making. I love science behind the behavioral science, right? I love looking at how people interact and what are the stats and data points behind that and why, and being able to dive into those. So I'm just going to give you a few of those. And then we're going to jump into really what are expectations, what are agreements, why are they different, why is one more successful than the other, and then we're going to talk about some strategies. You'll find as you get to know me that I do try to stay very focused. I do try to really give you practical strategies to take into the real world and try right away, use right away, new thinking and new understanding that will drive new perspectives into your daily life. And so that's where we're going to try to spend as much time as we can. So here we go. So I am not the creator of expectations versus agreements. I am not the founder of it, but I love talking about them. What I find in my own work is that typically when conflict arises, it's because we had an expectation and we did not have an agreement. Somebody did not agree to do what you wanted them to do. We expected them to do it, and dang it, they didn't do it. Stephen Chandler is an executive leadership coach, and he has written some really wonderful books, but he also does podcasts, and he was doing podcasts before podcasts were a thing, right? Like they weren't even video recordings. They were just voice recordings. And if you were lucky enough to go find one, get one, and listen to it, it was always like, boo, you always left with something really cool. And the thing about Stephen Chandler is when you start his podcast, for example, I was re-listening to one the other day. His voice is really monotone and he's really kind of like chill. And then he just like ramps up into like really important stuff that he's saying, and it doesn't matter. He's not even a great talker. He's just really, what he says is so important. And so you are mesmerized by him. So look him up. I actually have his website up that I can share the link with you guys, but I want to give him credit to this workshop because the truth of the matter is, like, he did a fantastic job and has done a fantastic job about talking about this in his own work and in his own coaching, and it was life-changing for me, so why not share it with you? So his big premise is we have two choices, that in anything we do, we have two choices. We can have expectations of others, or we can create agreements. And what he talks about is that agreements are much, much more likely to be effective, to be joyful, to be creative and fun. And we're much more likely to follow through, and our lives are going to be much happier because of it. So here's some data for you. You are 8 times more likely to follow through on an agreement than you are an expectation. That means You are more likely to be disappointed if you don't have an agreement in place. You have an 80% chance of disappointing someone with an expectation. That's a huge fail rate, right? Huge fail rate. I was talking to a woman that I work with in my network in Austin a few days ago, and she was saying, I had given my team a project with a checklist and a due date, this whole shebang, gave them all the directions, told them exactly what I needed, and they didn't get it done. And I was so frustrated. And it's because she had an expectation of them and they did not agree to the parameters of that agreement, to that expectation, and it failed, right? Why is that? Why are we so quick to fail somebody else's expectation versus following through on an agreement? Here you go. And you all will get this PowerPoint too, so don't feel like you have to screenshot or frantically write things down. You'll get a copy of this PowerPoint along with the recording as well. So take notes on the things that you want to remember and that are really important to you, but know that you'll also get a copy of this PowerPoint. So here's why. Expectations are toxic. They are absolutely toxic. We are setting people up for failure when we expect them to do something. But ruin a God relationship. That's not what I meant, guys. It will ruin a good relationship. I'm sorry, I gotta fix it. I can't help it. It's driving me nuts. There we go. You will ruin good relationships. Absolutely. It just will ruin a good relationship. They're unreasonable. You are asking for a power dynamic to happen. I'm expecting you to do this, and I expect you to comply. Nobody likes that. There's a lack of ownership, meaning if I'm expecting you to do the dishes tonight and you don't want to, or you don't feel like you have to, and we didn't make any types of agreements on it, you don't have to do it. It's not your responsibility. And the only person left with any feeling about it whatsoever is going to be me. Can you guys all still hear me okay? Yeah, okay, thanks. It might be just you have to change your settings, Elaine. And then expectations create resentment. This is where I would use the poll. How many of you have felt anger, resentment, hurt, frustration, really ticked off because there was an expectation that wasn't followed? I expect you to show up on time. You haven't showed up on time 10 times now. I'm about to go crazy. How many times have we done that, right? Thanks, Elaine. How many Elaines are in here? Man, you're right. There's a few. Okay, no one looks forward to an expectation. No one. Children don't, adults don't, no one looks forward to an expectation. In fact, people will rebel against an expectation. If you tell me I have to do something and I don't want to do it, I will absolutely rebel. So there's all the negatives of why expectations are so toxic and so troublesome. Agreements, on the other hand, are created with love and care. They can create joy in your relationships with others. They're co-authored, meaning that two people come together and say, we have a problem, we have a situation, we have an issue, we have something together, and we need to figure it out together. It creates an equilibrium. Remember how I said that it creates this power dynamic on expectations? I expect you to do this, and you are expected to comply. Relationships do not do that when you have an agreement. I would like this. I would like this. How do we come together to create together? I'll say it later on in this presentation, but I want to clarify here. Agreements are not compromises. I'm going to say that again. Agreements are not compromises. If you are looking for someone to give up their autonomy or give up something that's really important to them, that is not an agreement. And if you move away from what we'll talk about in a little bit here when I break this down, if you move away from the components of an agreement, you're no longer making an agreement. You're either moving back into expectations or you're moving into conflict or some other space, but you're no longer in agreements. Okay. Agreements are much stronger. As I said, you are 8 times more likely to follow through on an agreement than you are an expectation. They're creative and fun. People have fun making agreements. When you create a culture in your personal and professional life where agreements are possible, you can be creative. The sky is the limit is what I always say in my teams. It's the sky is the limit. We can be so creative on how we solve problems, on how we look at conflict, on how we give each other feedback, on the ways in which that we build relationships. It helps you make a promise both to yourself and to others. We are more likely to follow through on agreement because it's our word. We've agreed. I will do that. It helps you make that promise. And as I mentioned before, they're just way more fun. It's so much more fun to create an agreement with somebody than it is to expect something of them and leave disappointed, hurt, and frustrated. Admit. All right, I'm going to move on to here. All right, so you'll see this a lot in my presentations. And this is what I come back to all the time when I think about how to help in mediation and conflict resolution, how I help people build really meaningful relationships, both in their work and personal lives, right? Like, how do we go about doing that? In almost every virtual workshop I'll do, you'll see this slide. And it's such a simple one, but I really want to reiterate here. Everyone, every single human being on this planet wants to feel loved, validated, and heard. And if we can remember that in every interaction we have with others, it's half the battle. That we have to remember we're not in battle, that we are actually trying to really care about others so that others also care about us, and we create joy in our lives, right? So if I'm going into a space to make an agreement, or I'm frustrated with another person, I cannot go into a conversation about agreements if I'm going in with frustration, anger, resentment. I have to go in ready to love, validate, and hear the other person. And then I want that from the other person. Now, if I expect it going in and they don't act that way, we're right back to square one on this conversation, right? That I go in and I say, you know what, I'm going to come in with love and care, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to validate. And I want the other person to do that, but I have to start there, right? If the other person doesn't come in with that mentality, are you in a space to make agreements? Probably not. I'm going to pause as I'm about to switch slides. Any thoughts, questions? What are you thinking at this time so far? Is there any questions you want to throw into the chat or into the Q&A to help drive some of the thought process here as we move into some of the details farther? Any parking lot ideas that came out while I was jabbering away? Okay. Thanks, Elaine. All right. Okay, so how do we make agreements? I've said this a lot too. If you've gone to my 3-point conversation workshop, which I'm planning to do again in February or March, it's a really good one. So the 3-point conversation is a totally other topic, but I talk about this there too because it's super helpful. And that's for navigating difficult conversations. So as we're making agreements, we're probably feeling like we might be navigating a difficult conversation. So that other workshop is super handy too, also super duper free. So I'll be sure to get you guys on the list for when that one comes out. But what I always say is, the first thing you have to do when you're heading into a space where you feel discomfort in having a real, truthful, honest conversation with somebody is you have to breathe in that discomfort, like really breathe it in. And then you have to communicate out your needs. And now, again, let's go back to the slide here, right? If I communicate out, oh, that's my dog. If I communicate out in a way that's not loving, caring, validating, or active listening, do you think I'm going to be able to get to a space of agreements? Probably not, right? So just remember that. So as you're breathing in your own discomfort, you really need to communicate out your needs. I need to have a conversation about the project that I gave you last week. Can we do that? Yeah, sure. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. So you have to breathe in the discomfort and find a way to really truly articulate your needs heading into the conversation. That's step one. And sometimes it takes some real planning out. I have never gone, well, I can't say never. I have tried to never go into a conversation, especially as a leader, where I am helping mediate a situation, or I am in a conflict, or I'm in a situation where I have to talk to an employee or a direct report. I have to talk to somebody on a really difficult topic, like not showing up for a live event. You know, you had 300 people in a virtual room and you didn't show up. I have to have that conversation with you. So I usually will plan it out before I go into that conversation, because I want to stay in a space where I can be open to making a new agreement for heading forward, to try to avoid that happening. So try to create better accountabilities and that ownership piece in the agreement. Maybe that person didn't show up because they didn't think it was an agreement. They didn't think they had to be there, right? I have to go in with very, very, very high open-mindedness to what I can do to create an agreement, and very low expectations, zero expectations. If I go in expecting that person to have been in that live event, and don't get me wrong, it's horrible to be the manager of somebody who doesn't show up for 300 people. It doesn't feel good. It really doesn't. But if I go in with that frustration, if I go in with that disappointment, it's because I expected them to show up. And that's not how I can make an agreement. I have to go in being open to hearing what the heck happened and what can I do to help build their accountability and their responsibility into our future relationship together. Oop, I just went boom, boom, boom. Here we go. Okay, so an agreement must be, and this is kind of where I was leading into, I have to be in an open mindset to say, I am ready to make an agreement and I am going to set my expectations out the door, because all they did was create resentment, anger, and frustration. And that person is also not feeling great about it. So let's just move forward and figure out how to do this. An agreement must be fair. It has to be agreed upon. If it's not agreed upon, if both parties don't say, okay, every Thursday you make the dinner, I do the dishes, that sounds really fair. I'm going to do that. If that's not agreed upon, if I say, well, I'm making dinner on Thursday, can you do the dishes? No, I can't. I have my workout at 6:30. It's not agreed upon. So it doesn't work. So it has to be fair. It has to be agreed upon, and it has to address concerns and needs from both parties. So for example, I'm going to go back to that virtual event, which is a true story that really did happen. That virtual event, something happened for that person to not be there, right? I need to be able to, as their leader, address those concerns as well, those issues as well. Right? So we have to be able to address all the needs, all the concerns, all the issues from both parties to be able to get to a space of understanding, to build new agreements. Agreements have to solve a problem, improve something, or meet a need. Otherwise, it's not really an agreement. It's just something that we have an understanding about, right? An agreement means that we're making a promise to each other. So it's either solving a problem that we've had together. Maybe you're always late and I'm always early, and it's a really big piece of contention in our friendship, right? It has to solve that problem. Maybe we improve upon something. Maybe I'm really bad at calling you back and I want to get better at calling you back. It meets a need. I'm so tired of doing all of the housekeeping around the house. I'm really needing that need met, where it alleviates some of my work so I can go do other things that bring me joy. Both parties have to feel good once the agreement is made. If I walk away singing and dancing, right, and you walk away going, well, that seems like a lot on my plate. That seems like a lot of responsibility I just took on. That's not a good agreement. It's not a good agreement. Both parties have to feel good about the agreement. And I always say too, if you're going to make an agreement, be sure to do that emotional check-in at the end. How do you feel about that? Do you feel good about it? Do we need to make any tweaks or adjustments? Which brings me to the next point, which there is no rush and there should be no anxiety in making an agreement. An agreement might take days, it might take weeks, it might take months, right? If you think about legal contracts, legal agreements, those sometimes take months and months to iron out together, right? There is no rush to making an agreement. You don't have to do it in a 30-minute phone call. You don't have to do it in a 1-hour lunch meeting. You don't have to do it this week. But if you're constantly working towards trying, you're getting somewhere, right? I had an employee that I worked with for 6 months to get anywhere. But when it came to showing up for things, always late, didn't show, tried to get other people to cover. I spent 6 months working on the why, the how, the trust to try to really get somewhere. And we did. And we both felt good about it at the end. We don't always have that kind of time, but then I'm coming back to that reminder that if we don't have that time, if there is an emergency or a situation where you have, something happening outside of your space that's pushing, then it's no longer an agreement, right? It might be a mandate. It might be an expectation. But agreements cannot be rushed, and they shouldn't be from a place of fear, anxiety, resentment, or anger. And then again, an agreement is not a compromise. I am not giving up something for us to have an understanding, for us to make a promise to each other. I am not sacrificing something to make an agreement. Thoughts, questions? Does anyone have an example that they want to share that maybe they came in going, I had this expectation, I've been super disappointed or frustrated? Is there anyone that wants to share like a problem you've been having or a conflict that we could use as an example?
I mean, I guess I could, as far as work. I had an employee who was not, there was a certain amount of time that was a totally reasonable amount of time to get the job done. And she was acting like it was taking her all day to do what should really take her a third of the day to do. And it was making her other 2 coworkers pick up the slack. And so when they came to me, she was also on the phone a lot while she was doing the work, which was distracting in general because we were hearing her side of the conversation all day. So I don't know if I handled it well at the beginning, but instead of directly talking to her about it, I basically came in and started doing part of her job with her. So I could kind of just finish her part of her job in the right amount of time, and when it didn't really improve, I had a staff meeting with the entire department and basically kind of addressed, okay, this is what we need to do because we've been picked up, we're picking up business. We need to get everything done in a timely fashion. And I just kind of set parameters with distractions, outside distractions, personal calls, how we would handle that from now on. And I also took part of her job, and instead of only assigning her one part where the other people did the other 2 parts, I had them split all 3 things together. So that way she's more accountable because she has to do a little bit of other things. And she wasn't just doing one task and taking a lot of time. And after that, she kind of came back to work and was pouty for a while. She had a bad attitude for a couple of weeks and was real quiet. But after the new year, she came back and now she's doing all this. She's doing exactly what I need her to do, So I think I probably should have had that general staff meeting right at the beginning, instead of doing what I did at the beginning to try to avoid the conflict. I think that would have been better. I think her reaction would have happened anyway because she was at fault and probably didn't want to admit it, and probably felt a little bit of shame of the fact that she was slacking and not behaving well at work. But I think if I just had that staff meeting and outlining different things, and also I sent an email out to everyone going over the agreement that we made about this is how we're going to handle stuff from now on. I did send that out too. So there was like some documentation as well as accountability. But it ended up working out fine so far. She's doing exactly what she needed to. But anyway, that's all I got.
Thanks, Candace. What do you guys think? Give some feedback. I have lots of ideas, but give Candace some feedback about her experience and then how she addressed it. What do you think? Do you think it was expectations, agreements? What do you think? Give her some feedback.
I mean, it sounds like to me, Candace, that you set some agreements when you had the staff meeting and then sent out the documentation that perhaps, I mean, maybe there's an agreement in a workspace anyways, but that it wasn't, the expectation wasn't being met. And so you adjusted it to making sure that it was very clear what the agreement should be.
Thanks, Michaela. There's 3 things I want to say real quick, Rachel, and then I want you to jump in. There's 3 words I want us to really think about and like lay down the semantics on. One is expectations, one's agreement, and then the other one is mandates, which I call non-negotiables, like basically the minimums of what you have to do to keep your job, for example, or like the minimums of what you have to do to stay in the relationship you have with your husband or wife, right? Like there's some non-negotiables that we've agreed upon in like a really basic way by choosing to be together or choosing to get married or choosing to talk about our core values together or choosing to work for a specific company or in a specific role. So I want to think about that because Candace, I want to say like, I feel like I heard a lot of expectations, but maybe in that staff meeting, you guys came to agreement, but Rachel, I want you to jump in.
That's kind of what I was going to say is like hearing the story, just I heard all expectations. I obviously don't know all the details of it, but to me, it sounded like a lot of expectations, but I'm trying to understand what it would look like if it was all agreements. Like I can't quite make that like jump in yet. Cause I think I probably would have handled it very similarly. But I don't really know what the agreement style of handling it would have been.
Yeah, I think that's why these examples sharing is really important because I can help with that, right? So Candace, I would say my sentiment is you held a meeting to talk about expectations and you set those expectations. There were some non-negotiables there. Everybody on the phone call agreed to meet those expectations moving forward. And there was a little bit and han about it, but everybody basically did it. So to me, you had an expectations call. In the chat, can you just put in there whether you think it was an expectations call or an agreement call? Just throw it in there. And if you want to just come off mute and say it, that's helpful too. If you're walking or on the go. Jamie, go for it. Yeah, so I'm going to help you guys flip it a little bit, okay? Because it is hard. It's hard to move from, I know what needs to happen. I need to tell everybody and remind everybody what needs to happen, and then they're going to do it. That is typically how management works, right? I know what needs to be done. I manage a bunch of people that are supposed to do it. I tell them how to do it, and then they do it, right? But what we find is that really doesn't work, you guys. Remember, 80% of the time, you will be disappointed. So the flip of that is, and when I started working with a team 3 years ago, I would go into staff meetings we had an agenda, we would go in, and I would throw something on the table. I would throw a topic on the table. We had a project due on Friday, but I heard from you guys Friday afternoon that you couldn't get it done on that time period and you needed an extension. That's the issue. Threw it on the table. And there would be crickets. And I work virtually, right? So I have 30 people on a call refusing to get on camera, refusing to come off mute, refusing to go into the chat. And I'm their new manager and they don't really give a shit, right? So excuse my language, they don't give a shit. So I'm going in and I'm throwing an issue on the table and I'm saying, this is an issue. First step is, do they agree that's an issue? They might not think not turning it in on Friday is an issue. We did not agree that Friday was doable. I immediately am already disappointed in my expectations and they don't really care because they felt like they couldn't get it done, right? So the first thing we have to do is throw an issue on the table and ask for input as to why that issue exists and whether or not you feel like it's an issue. At the end of that, consensus must be made. I call it consensus-driven decision-making. So as a group, 100% of the people don't have to agree, but consensus needs to. We need majority rules. We need a little bit of peer pressure to build agreements with those people that might be a little resistant. Candace, your resistor fell in line because one, you were literally doing her job for her, with her, right? And two, more than likely her teammates were like, what the F? And she was starting to realize that and feel it because you threw it out into the arena and made everybody recognize that somebody wasn't pulling their weight. That's an expectations discussion, and it does work for a certain amount of time for a specific issue, but I guarantee you it won't work after a while. You'll have to go right back to the expectations discussion. My goal in agreements is that you create the ownership on their side. So in my first few meetings with my team, crickets. Okay, well, I'm not fixing this problem for you, and it is a problem. I am going to mandate down that we have a problem. That is a non-negotiable. My boss and my boss's boss and my boss's boss's boss know it's a problem. So therefore, it's our problem. And for us to get off their radar, it cannot be a problem. And the truth of it is, people want off the radar of the upper ups, right? They don't want to be up there. They don't want to be talked about in all hands meetings. They don't want to be called out for the lowest numbers. They don't want to be called out as the least performing team or the one that has the most drama. They don't want to be the ones that everybody wants to transfer off, right? Those are all expectations discussions. So if you can identify what the non-negotiables are. So the non-negotiable, Candace, for you is we have something that has to get done in a specific amount of time. Why? And can we all agree that that's just the case? Otherwise, we're all going to be living in hell because I'm going to hear about it, which means you're going to hear about it. Everybody's going to hear about it until we figure this out. But that means we have to go back to the operational side of what we do, systems and processes. We have to go back to trust, relationships, communication. We have to break it down into the basics of why that's happening. So you have to take that topic and throw it on the table, and you don't get to fix it as the leader. You don't get to fix it as the power holder. And that's really, to me, the big difference in work environments between expectations and agreements. Expectations are a power dynamic. There's mandates, there's non-negotiables. And in some cases, those have to exist, right? Otherwise, we all get fired. But if we can take that baseline minimum, that mandate that has to happen for us to keep our jobs, now we can build the how. We can build processes and systems together. We can build communication strategies together. We can start building together. We can't do that if we don't trust each other or we don't agree that we're even talking about the same issue. Rachel, does that give you any brainstorm into an issue that you might be having that's currently an expectation, but maybe we could tweak it into agreement? Or anybody else, if you want to jump in.
I have someone that I work with that since I started at this job 3 years ago, has never met my deadlines. And I've tried a couple of different things to get them to meet my deadlines, sending constant reminders and just being on top of them a little bit more and trying to help them with what they're doing. But I don't think I've ever, thinking about it in this way, I don't know that I've ever tried to have more of a two-way conversation about that. It's always just been this is what I need from you and you're not delivering that. But I don't mean to be negative, but I feel even thinking about handling it in a different way, I'm well, how would that help? Because it's been 3 years and it hasn't worked thus far. I don't know. I guess I would look for advice on how to handle something like that.
I would like to say the way you've handled it is in an expectation framework, right? So for 3 years, you've made these expectations and you've communicated them and they have failed you, right? Coming into an agreement space may open up new kinds of conversations that will create a co-author space, right? It'll create it'll create a power dynamic where you're ready to listen. And the truth of it is, and I say this all the time, I can coach you in or I can coach you out. I don't fire people. But the way I coach you in is I want you to be part of this team. I want you to help us be successful. And if you can't do that or you don't want to because it doesn't quite work, I am happy to coach you out, provide a referral. Maybe this isn't the right job for you. Candace, you might have heard me say this before, but I have this one direct report that used to work for me, and she was similar to what you're saying, Rachel. She just never met expectations. She was the least performing on my team. There was 1 month where she had 3 phone calls she made in a whole month. Like, I don't know what you're doing, but it's not this, right? It took her about 6 months to trust me that I wasn't trying to fire her. I really wasn't. What I was trying to do was get her to see that on my team, we work and there are non-negotiables and there are mandates that we have to follow through on, but we as a team also support each other, care about each other, and we're there for each other. And we communicate. We go into the discomfort. We breathe that baby in and we communicate out. So for her to trust me that I'm not trying to fire her, get her in trouble, took a long time. But because I did that, and we as a team did that, we all held her, we were able to coach her out. She just didn't like the job. It wasn't what she signed up for. It wasn't what she thought it would be. And she felt like if she had been truthful about that, I would have fired her. And most managers honestly probably would have, right? Most managers would have fired her if they said, if she said, I hate this job. I read the job description. I went through the interview process. I was so excited. And then I get in there and everything you're telling me to do is nothing like what you said you were giving me. I'm bored. I hate it. All I deal with is students that don't like da-da-da-da-da or whatever it is, right? I was able to coach her out into a different department, into a different job, into something that brought her joy. And she's happy. She calls me every year on the anniversary of her starting that job and thanks me. Right? It opened up new conversations. And again, like, it doesn't mean that you're going to get there tomorrow or she's going to be like, oh yeah, let me throw out there why I hate meeting your deadlines or, whatever it is. But what it does is it opens up new opportunities for conversations that aren't there because with expectations, people shut down. Eve, yeah.
Hi there. What about when the expectation is to your boss? I'm the lead of 5 people, so I'm not their direct supervisor. And there's one person that for a year, it's been noticed, well, definitely by me, other people in our department, but other people in the company, how he disappears during the shift and just so much time standing around. And it just, for the life of me, I can't figure out why they won't do something. I've emailed my direct supervisor and the GM and had numerous in-person talks. And I've, other directors in the company even come up with me. They've even showed me a photograph one of the other directors took and said, employee of the month, because he's sitting there watching a TV. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's crazy. And I have the expectation that they will take some action, have a conversation, some accountability.
No, he doesn't have to because you haven't fired him. Why would he change?
I mean, that my GM, that my supervisor or the GM above her will take action because I don't have the direct authority over him, the lead, but it's up to them to actually take more of a disciplinary role or whatever.
Well, and for you, Eve, you have 2 choices, right? You could go the traditional route and say, here's the expectations of this person. Here's evidence that that's not occurring. Let's put them on a PIP, right? Personal improvement plan or professional improvement plan. Let's give him 90 days. He'll turn it around if he doesn't want to get fired, or if he does, then he won't. And you can go through that way, right? That's all based on the expectation that he will comply. The thing I love about this conversation and this kind of knowledge base is that the behavior change in this way of a mandate, a top-down, a behavior change can occur to comply, right? Because there's a consequence. If I don't comply, I will be fired. It's in writing, right? I will make an agreement to not get fired, is basically what they're saying, right? That comply will work for a while. But typically, there's two things that will happen. They'll either comply to get off your radar, and then they will slip back into not complying because they don't want to comply, right? And they know that they can come off the PIP, be under the radar. It'll take you a while to get them back on the PIP, right? And then once they're on the PIP, they got another 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is. Like, they can drag this out for years. And there are some people that have made careers out of doing that, 100%, right? You can keep doing that, right? You could do that. I hate doing that. It's such a soul sucker for everybody, right? And then there's all this animosity and this frustration of like, why does Ted get to sit around watching TV when all of us are busting our butts and nobody's fired him yet? He just goes after PIP after PIP after PIP. It's demoralizing.
Yeah.
Right? I prefer having those tough conversations. I would call Ted into my office. He doesn't have to be, I don't have to be the one that hires or fires him, but we as a group can say, let's have the tough conversation. Who's willing to do it? And most people will say, not it. Right? Most people will be like, I don't want to have that conversation. If you can sit, I'm going to call him Ted. I don't know why. But if you can sit Ted down and really have an agreements conversation. And this is where the 3-point conversation could come in handy. I don't have enough time to run into it today, but what you'll do is you'll start by throwing the elephant on the table. Ted, how do you think your performance has been this year? I'm not going to solve this problem for you. See, what you're doing with expectations is you're telling him exactly what he needs to do to not get fired. And I'm sorry, like, I don't like working with people that just want to not get fired. I want to work with people that create joy and love and care and fun, innovation, ideas in my workplace, right? And probably Ted does too. And there's something going on that's making him shut down. I need to be open to loving, validating, and hearing Ted. And look, I may have to coach him out, but I can't do that. I can't coach him in or coach him out without understanding his behavioral science. What is going on with Ted? Why is he checking out? Is it because he can? Look, some people aren't workhorses. Some people aren't innovators. Some people aren't builders. Some people are work. Some people will work just to make the paycheck, right? That's okay. But if they're not doing it, then that's where it becomes the problem, right? So maybe he's just doing what he's doing because he knows he won't get fired. Nobody wants to be miserable at work, first of all, right? Nobody wants to be, I guess I flip it. Everybody wants to be valued. That there's something that's shutting him down. And I need to try to understand that. And there may be a no resolution in my company, but I can at least compassionately coach you out. Or maybe because I'm open to trying to hear about what is going on, I might be able to come to an agreement and I wouldn't have been able to before. I had a professor that was on my team. I used to manage a team of professors, and I was the director of a master's program in management and leadership at a university. So I managed 11 courses. I managed about 30 professors, and it was my job to keep everybody learning and engaged and all that stuff. And I had this professor who students were really complaining about. His colleagues were really complaining about him. And I tried the expectations route with him, right? Sometimes it's quick and easy. Like, hey, man, like, you have to respond to emails within 24 hours. Like, it's part of our MOU. Like, it's part of our agreement that we have as a university, right? Like, students must be responded to in 24 hours. Like, there's no negotiating that. I tried a few of those, but it wasn't working. He just kept not meeting them, right? So I tried a new approach, and I said, you know, Arnold, we've talked about your response time to emails multiple times. What's going on? Like, are you okay? Like, are you okay? Because what I'm finding is, like, during your office hours, you know, I'm trying to ping you, your colleagues are trying to ping you, we're trying to support you, you have people covering, you're not responding to some emails, what's going on? And it turns out his son had had a manic episode in his first week at college. And he was dealing with that. And he felt like he had to hide it because that means that he's not committed to his job. The irony of that, though, right, is he's disappointing everyone, including himself, that he's trying to hang on and hold on and do it all, but he's doing not at all, right? He's failing at all of the things. But when we were able to really talk about what was going on and what his schedule could be, what he was capable of, am I okay with that? Can I agree to those terms? And would our team help him while he's going through this issue? And I had to ask him, are you okay sharing some information with the team? He was a very private person. He would never share this with anybody. He's very private, very quiet. And I said, we don't have to share the details, but we got to share that something's wrong, right? We want our team to care. And we want to care about you. So, but I got to tell them something. What are you comfortable with me telling them? So I went to the team and I said, here's what's going on with Arnold. We have an issue here. We have a capacity issue now because we have a person who needs to be home more. And if we don't feel compassion towards that, who are we, right? Like we're human beings first. We care about people first. And so the team decided, all right, well, let's cover Arnold. Let's figure it out. How much time does he need? Can we agree to that? Can Arnold go and be on duty 2 hours a day doing X, X, and X? And can he take Thursdays and Fridays off so he can go be up at the campus where his son is in institution in an in-house facility? Can we do that? Okay, yeah. So the primary person that took over for Arnold and covered for him for the 8 weeks that he ended up needing, 6 months later, her mom was diagnosed with cancer, went into hospice. Guess who was the first person to cover for her when she needed to go spend the time with her mom that she would never get back, right? That's the last time that she has with her mom. We as a team decided we want her to be able to have that time. Again, we went through, what do you need? How do we do it? What are the things that have to be taken care of? Who was the first person to say, I'll take on the majority of that? Who do you think? It was Arnold, because she had done that for him. Agreements can be made from places of love and joy in the workplace. If I had stayed in expectations, I would never have given the gift of care to Arnold and Susan, right? They got to truly care about each other in a way that made their work better. When we move into agreements, we're able to have real conversations with people. We can't do that if we keep the expectations on the table. Woo, that brings us right to the hour. Look at that. I didn't plan that, but I planned it well, didn't I? I'm going to give you one more slide that's in here because it's a good one. And this is where I spent a lot of my time describing the kind of conversations, I just dropped something, the kind of conversations that we can have. But we're able to do that because we're in our wise mind. So when you're in your emotional space, we tend to be reactive. We think with our emotions. We tend to say things without processing them first. In our rational mind, we can also forget, though, that emotions are important, right? If I had said to Arnold, hey, work is work, processes are processes. What do we need to do to fix the process? And I didn't take into consideration that he had feelings and that he had issues and emotions he was dealing with, I wouldn't have been able to get where I was. I wouldn't have been able to do what I was able to do as their leader. The wise mind understands that we can be rational, data-driven people with emotions, and we can make sound decisions. So I want to give that last little tidbit for you guys before we end. I already did set up another virtual workshop. If you liked this one, please think about coming on another lunch and learn with me Tuesday, February 7th. This kind of leads into some of the stuff that I had talked about today, but they all kind of interrelate in my opinion, like relational strategies. They're all really good. I like to talk about how sorry doesn't cut it. that apologies have to have an opportunity for repair. Otherwise, there's like this unsaid discomfort. There's this like wedge that you can't figure out how to repair. Well, I said I was sorry. It's not quite enough. So I'm going to do my next one on that and why that is and how that is. And then if you can do me a big favor, in the chat or on the, well, yeah, just in the chat is fine. In the chat, tell me what you loved, what you hated, feedback, what could have been better, what was your biggest takeaway. Just give me one sentence that kind of just wraps up your biggest takeaway or what was valuable or what I could do better next time. I love doing these, but it's always helpful to hear from everybody on how I could do them better.